night may be long and the dark may be deep, but the answers are there to be found. Whether it's the normal, the abnormal, or the paranormal, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond reality.
So my prediction here is that they found the treasure on Oak Island, and they found it early in their season of filming, so they have to fill all these episodes with nothing so that they can save the discovery of the treasure for the final episode, because otherwise I can't explain why there's a TV show anymore, because the last few weeks have just been completely I'm not going to say boring, because there's some interesting things, but they were boring.
They were pretty boring.
Yeah, pretty much boring.
So, I don't know. I tuned in, the wife turned on Curse of Oak Island tonight, and I don't know. I found myself browsing Facebook.
Yeah, the last, I think, 3, maybe 4 episodes have been rather lackluster. I mean, let's face it. For anybody who's following the television show or knows of what's going on there, the excavation of Smith's Cove is showing some pretty cool stuff. But I don't see them getting super excited about it, which makes me believe they know it's all searcher stuff. There's nothing there that's old enough to be from the depositors. Just because I don't see any real excitement. They kind of act like, oh, that's kind of cool. But
yeah, you're like me. I always watch the facial expression.
Right.
And I don't know. I'm not seeing anything. I'm getting bored.
Well, like I said,
it's kind of like how it was with The Walking Dead. I literally have not watched it in a season and a half.
I'm with you. I'm exactly
almost 2 seasons.
I think I'm right in the same place with you on that. So I just have to assume here that they found the treasure, and then they had to go and backfill all these episodes, and so that they could save the reveal of the treasure to the last episode.
I think if they found the treasure, there would be no hiding it.
Well, that's a good point.
Unless it's like one nugget of gold.
One of the things,
old Spanish coin.
What was the name of the author? Randall Sullivan, the author that wrote the book.
Yeah. We had him on.
We had him on a few weeks ago. He's going to be on next week's episode again, so I'm anxious to see what he has to say there.
I don't know. Should be interesting.
Yeah. Well. But I know other people a little frustrated too. I've kind of been reading social media about it, but
yeah. It's definitely the masses are feeling that same way about it. But hey, everybody, welcome to Beyond Reality Radio with me, Jason Hawes, and JV Johnson. Tonight we've got some great show. Well, we got a great show. Tonight we're going to be talking with John Potash, author and documentarian. We're going to be discussing his newly released film, Drugs as a Weapon Against Us, the CIA War on Musicians and Activists. It's based on the book Drugs as Weapons Against Us, CIA's murderous targeting of SDS, Panthers, Hendrix, Lenin, Cobain, Tupac, and other leftists. So it should be really interesting. I mean, we've had John on in the past, and it's sort of a mind-blowing show.
Yeah, I remember our discussion when he was on the first time, and it was mind-blowing. And the idea that our intelligence community may be doing something that he asserts they're doing, as in using drugs to control parts of society through these celebrities, that in itself is not only scary. I mean, this is the type of stuff that, sci-fi novels like, 1984 and Big Brother and all these things that we fear from our governments. This is right out of that textbook.
Well, especially if you go to John's website and you can watch some of the releases and some of the talks that have been out there about the government admitting, and all these documents that have come out about the government bringing drugs in and doing certain things in these areas, and people who talk up about it mysteriously end up usually dead. So it's kind of scary. But you can check out his website at John Potash. That's JOHN Potash, POTASH.com, and just watch the trailer, because I think the trailer right there will kind of make you uneasy.
Yeah, it makes you really uncomfortable. And then in the second part of the program, we've got a couple of paranormal investigators. We've had them on the program before, Rhonda and Dwight Hull. They've written a couple of books about the haunted Southwest. They have a new one that has just come out as a follow-up to their first book, and we're going to talk about haunted stories of the Southwest with Rhonda and Dwight Hull.
And then tomorrow, very exciting night. We've got a good friend of ours who's been on the show a few different times, and it's Dr. Knowledge. And this guy is awesome. But and we're going to be talking about fascinating facts from the all-time book of fascinating facts.
Yeah. So. Again, I think this will be the third time he's been on the program over the course of 3 years, and we always enjoy having him on because we always learn something, and we're always, we leave the program laughing and smiling and thinking, wow, that was really cool.
Yeah, and some of it's just crazy, some of the things that he brings up and why we do certain things or why certain foods are known for certain areas and how things. It's mind blowing. It really is. And then Thursday, of course, we've got readings with Rebecca Foster.
Yeah, it's the first Thursday of February, so we do our readings with Rebecca. I know.
February. And you know what's crazy? All right, so last February, I mean, we had mind-blowing cold temperatures. We were in minus 10, minus 12. It was 65 degrees here today. Yesterday was 63. Tomorrow will be 32.
Yeah.
But it's been incredible. It truly felt like it was spring.
Well, all it takes is one.
I was in my G-string in the backyard.
I don't want to know.
Doing yoga. It was awesome, JV.
Ooh, I don't want to hear about stretches.
I took some video. I'm going to send it to you.
I don't want to see stretches in a G-string on you. No, thank you. All it takes is with that, for that Arctic blast to kind of rear its ugly head, and it can drop temperatures in a real hurry. Everything's going to freeze like crazy around here.
Definitely not looking forward to it. I know we've got already some ice warnings for tomorrow night and everything else, so it should be fun.
Yeah, it should be fun at that. I did want to bring up something that I thought was pretty cool. There is real concern among the military community in the United States because there's been a report that the Russian military is now using a new weapon that makes its targets hallucinate. It makes them vomit, and it makes them obviously incapacitated. Now,
wow.
There were weapons like that back in World War I. They were chemical gas weapons, and they've been banned by international treaties. These aren't gas weapons. These are some type of beam, it seems.
Well, they were messing around with microwave beams and so forth there for a while. So
yeah, this particular weapon uses a strobe light effect that makes through the eyesight, it makes it more difficult for people to aim, and it also makes them hallucinate the targets, that is, and makes them, as I said, vomit. They get dizzy, they get disoriented, and 20% of the people experience hallucinations. And it's called the fill-in, is what the weapon is called. And the Russians have armed it on their warships, 2 of them at this point, and the weapon is expected to be installed on more ships as those ships are built.
Well, that'd be crazy because in a war, I mean, you pretty much neutralize the enemy without ever firing a shot. And that's scary stuff.
Yeah, it is scary. And I mean, again, I go back to the fact I've been watching Star Trek, and I don't know if they have that weapon on there, but it sure seems like something from Star Trek.
Yeah, very possibly. Hey, if you haven't, you head over to facebook.com/Beyond Reality Radio. Like that Facebook page for us. Then head to beyondrealityradio.com. You can find all the stations we are on across the country. You can download the free smartphone apps, which will also allow you to listen live, catch past shows, and more. Or any night we're live, just click the Listen Live or the Listen Live and Chat button right there from the website, and you can listen while browsing the rest of the web. If you download the show from iTunes or anywhere else, just take 2 seconds of your time and please rate it for us. It helps get the show out there a little more, and we greatly appreciate that. And we know that there's a lot of people who listen to the show. I know it's being downloaded tens of thousands of times a day, and we greatly appreciate that support. So just take 2 seconds and rate it. Please. How about that one?
Yeah, that was nice. That was very nice. Very polite, and a little pathetic, but that's okay.
Well, it's kind of what my kids do to me. When Dad, can I please have that?
Well, I'm going to say, hey, can we please get John Potash on so we can start talking about this documentary, Drugs as Weapons Against Us?
All right, you heard him, Slick. Get John on. All right, we're going to take a quick break, get John, and we got a lot more to come. You listen to Jason and JV Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Did you know that online retailers like Amazon have constant deals that can save you money on the things you buy every day? It's no joke. Save 40%, 50%, even 80% on great products, and all you have to do is know about them. Noodle Shark is the way to be alerted when something good is coming your way. Noodle Shark is the social media page that lists great deals that not only save you money, but give you the deals before anyone else has them. All you have to do is find Noodle Shark on Facebook. Search it as The Noodle Shark. That's The Noodle Shark, because you deserve to save too. Become a shark and save. Our guest tonight is a returning guest to the program, John Potash. He's written a book called Drugs as Weapons Against Us, and now he's made it into a documentary film. And we're always excited to have this conversation. John, welcome back to Beyond Reality Radio.
Thanks for having me on again, Jason.
Oh, thanks for coming back.
So you've made the book into a documentary. Tell us about the process.
Well, it was just a matter of just getting as much of the sources that I have in the book saying what I said they said on film, and getting as many of the documents that I reference in my book on film. And, I just feel like I got a whole lot of these whistleblowers, CIA whistleblowers such as John Stockwell and Phil Agee, FBI whistleblowers such as Wes Swearingen, former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark, people like that, saying that basically our government or the CIA was using drugs to control the masses on behalf of the super rich. And they particularly used these musicians, some of our favorite musicians, they manipulated them to promote drugs inadvertently, and then when they started sobering up and getting more into activism, those musicians sadly were done away with.
So, I mean, again, just as the first time we heard you talk about this, there's a bit of it's kind of scary, but it's also a bit dumbfounding. What was the intent of the CIA in its effort to control people for the rich? What were they trying to accomplish?
Well, I show the evidence that the CIA was founded by the very wealthiest families in this country, the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgans, Bushes, Carnegies, etc., and that was in 1947. And the document that founded them, the National Security Act of 1947, basically made them above the law. And so they proceeded to start projects such as MKUltra, which is the kind of umbrella project for this I talk about, that were in their own documents saying using drugs as unconventional weapons, and so people think of unconventional weapons as being used in warfare, but actually those weapons are being used, I show all the evidence on people in the United States. And I show the CIA documents that say that they're to be used surreptitiously on people of all social levels and in the United States. And that comes from a U.S. Senate Church Committee kind of a summary of what they found in the CIA documents of the in Project MKUltra. So I show footage from a documentary covering the Senate Church Committee hearings, saying they uncovered 16,000 documents from MKUltra. Other researchers have found up to 30,000 documents, and I quote a number of those documents. And it was showing, for example, that one of their top drugs that they were using, LSD, was used to manipulate us, and they found that they could just, with drugs in general, but particularly drugs like LSD and similar hallucinogenics, they could get people acting in ways they wanted and making those people think that they were acting on their own best interest. But they used drugs that way, and they used propaganda in general, such as just mainstream media that they owned. And that's why radio stations like yours are so important, radio programs like yours that present this alternative information.
Well, and the original design for MKUltra was pretty much to weaken individuals for interrogation, right, and force confessions and things of that nature. But of course, it expanded. It started being used for multiple different things.
Yeah, and that's what they keep. They keep that line, up, that saying it's just for interrogation, but all the evidence shows, and when when they were found out by John F. Kennedy in 1963 or 64, basically in 63, in 61 when he first came to office, he closed down MKUltra, and then it was found that it was operating anyway behind his back, behind the CIA director's back. They had to close it down yet again in 63. But so at that point, they had to change the name to hide it better, and they changed the name of Project MKUltra to Project MK Search. And then when they were found out again in 1973 by the Senate Church Committee, they pretended to close it down again, but whistleblowers say it continued just under different names, just like the FBI's operation, the counterintelligence program, that whistleblowers say continued under different names. And that was used against people that were pro-war and pro-civil rights, but particularly harshly used against the Black Panther Party. But MKUltra was found in the same way to be used against anyone who was pro-war and anyone who was pro-civil rights. And that turned out to be their main targets throughout the 60s, and that's what a lot of the documents show. And so, a lot of coverage of it, though, has these guys, all these MKUltra agents, and there was many. There was 199 sub-projects under Project MKUltra. And so they found that all these agents were spreading LSD around the world. They were traveling around the world getting people to use acid and other drugs. But particularly LSD was the most popular. They tested 36 different drugs on soldiers, thousands of soldiers, to see the effects for the use of these drugs as unconventional weapons. And so they knew the effects of all these different drugs, and then when they operationalized them, they knew how they could use them against anyone who protested their incredibly pro-war and anti-civil rights policies.
Well, and the thing was, also with MKUltra, especially during its infancy, a lot of people didn't even know that they were subjects and that were being experimented on. I mean, these things were going on to unknowing participants.
Yeah, involuntarily.
I mean, you take a sip out of a water bottle, and next thing you know, it's in your system.
Right, and so Paul Robeson, the first time, when they targeted him in 1961, it was 3 weeks before he was supposed to meet actually with Che Guevara and Fidel Castro to talk about relations and what they were doing over there. And he was in Moscow at the time singing, and so he was in a hotel room, and some American patriots influenced him to come to a party, and they dosed his drink, and he thought he was going crazy. And his adult son, Paul Robeson Jr., said he went over there, and then they did the same thing to him when he got over there, and they really ended up messing up Paul Robeson Sr.'s mind. Paul Robeson Jr. was lucky that he only drank a little bit of the drink, yes. But Paul Robeson Sr. was influenced to go and get into a hospital, and then they gave him ECT treatment at super high levels and really ruined his whole career. He had to
John, in the beginning of the discussion, you mentioned that in the documentary you found source footage for many of the people that you reference and quote as insiders and somewhat, I guess, whistleblowers, if you will. That's a pretty impressive list of people. They're pretty noteworthy, respectable, and high-profile people.
Yeah, thanks. So people like U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark, I have in the film, and he had told me in a conference in 1991 that he thinks the government uses drugs to sedate and divide the masses. And I just show even more evidence that they also use these drugs to disorient and divert the masses with people like Timothy Leary. I show the evidence that he admitted in an interview that he knew he was working for the CIA when he popularized LSD, saying turn on, tune in, drop out, and meaning drop out of activism, which was so, getting so popular at the time between the Freedom Riders going from the New York area down to help, Martin Luther King's movement in the South and all that. And but Timothy Leary set up shop in Millbrook Mansion, a place owned by the Mellon Hitchcock family, who owned Mellon Bank and Gulf Oil and all, and popularized LSD up there with loads of Project MKUltra scientists just hanging out there trying all kinds of psychedelics, and all the New Yorkers that came up for the party. They lured up there for the party. And so they did that to popularize drugs in that area, and then the Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters did the same in the San Francisco Bay Area. But Robert Lashbrook, the assistant director of MKUltra, went over to London, according to a book by A.E. Hotchner on the Rolling Stones, and Hotchner was the longtime editor for Ernest Hemingway. And so in his book, he says Hotchner went over to London with loads of money, loads of acid, and loads of agents, and directed those agents to get LSD in as many musicians' hands as possible in the beginning of 1965. And then later in 65, the dentist for George Harrison of the Beatles has John Lennon and Harrison over for dinner.
Yeah,
and
Dr. Robert.
Their coffee with acid.
Dr. Robert, yep.
Yeah. And so I show that's just no coincidence, because undercover the Daily Mail, which is the daily newspaper in England, said that in '67, Mick Jagger actually was a holdout from using acid for several years, and an undercover agent, FBI and MI5 agent named Dave Schneiderman, actually convinced Jagger to use LSD for the first time. And after he used it, a few hours later, the police came in and busted Jagger and Richards and others, but didn't bust Schneiderman, who had tons of drugs in his suitcase. So that's some of the ways they use these drugs. Got people introduced to these musicians. They had tons of other agents and ways to convince them, it wasn't so bad, you should trip some more. But then when they started sobering up, like when Lenin started settling down and raising his child and sobering up, and was getting more into activism, had told Newsweek magazine that he was going to be leading a protest in San Francisco. They did him in, and it identified the doorman that night at the Dakota that aided Chapman in the killing of Lenin. His name was Jose Joaquin Sangenis Perdomo, and he was a former member of the Bay of Pigs invasion, and was considered a hitman for the CIA and was on the CIA payroll.
Wow. So I have to understand here, the CIA was getting these drugs into the hands of people who could influence society, influence pop culture. Were they also handing these drugs out to citizens, just regular citizens? Were they bringing them into communities?
Oh, yes, in a huge way. I mean, in Vietnam, for example, John Stockwell, CIA agent who I got to talk to at a conference in 1990, had said that his agency was flying heroin from the Vietnam area into the United States. And I quote Judy Woodruff when Frontline, in a special Frontline feature, where she shows the CIA documents, testifying to this, that they were bringing tons of heroin from Vietnam to the United States. And so, they were doing that, and they happened to target the black communities at that time, and when soon after civil unrest like riots, race riots, the activists called them race rebellions, and they were targeting anti-war leaders such as the head of the Students for Democratic Society at Columbia University, which was the first place of building takeovers to protest the Vietnam War. I show the evidence. I show the picture of the undercover agent that infiltrated Abby Hoffman's group and then had a party with the SDS group and dosed the SDS members with acid. And so they were used against, top SDS leaders, along with infiltrating the Black Panthers with cocaine and getting them to use cocaine, and in other ways, and with other groups. I show how they were used against the Occupy movement too.
Were they trying to create addicts here, or was it just a case of, keep them busy, keep these folks busy and their minds off of, protests and other what they would consider destructive behavior?
Well, both. Now, acid's not as addictive. It's just disorienting and can hurt. I just showed the evidence that it really hurts your mind. And there's loads of evidence to that effect, and it hurts your emotional control, so it causes lots of anxiety. Now, being a counselor for the last 30 years and with a specialty in addictions and trauma, I have seen a lot of people, after using acid, how it really hurts their emotional states, but it diverts them from their best work. It hurts their mind from doing their best work, but also it does form, addictions in people. Of course, the heroin and cocaine are much more habit-forming, and so once you get people using cocaine and heroin, there's a better chance that they'll develop an addiction to it, especially with physiological withdrawal symptoms from heroin. Heroin and other opiates. So yes, it's for both reasons. But they were actually a guy named Ronald Stark was found to be working for the CIA since 1960, and he was the largest acid dealer in the world. He was trafficking acid with laboratories in at least 3 continents, and the top British official investigating his group in England found that his group in England actually distributed in just 3 years alone 100 million hits of acid. And so he was found by an Italian judge to, have been part of the CIA since 1960. The first judge actually ruling over Ron Stark's case was murdered. Second judge let him go because of all his proof that he was part of the Secret Services of the United States. So that's just some of the evidence of the way they were doing things, to hurt protest movements.
So even though he was breaking the law, he was doing this, he was, pretty much putting acid and stuff out on the streets. Because he was part of the CIA, he was pretty much above the law. He was void from any type of prosecution.
Yeah, well, the judge was apparently too scared. After the first judge was murdered, the second judge was too scared to even keep him in prison and let him go, and gave him over to the, American authorities. A government Italian commission, wrote a report on Ronald Stark about all that. So it's, it's well documented. And, he's just one example. There was just loads of networks that I should show all the intelligence connections to a number of networks, of acid networks, but the biggest one was the one he was part of, which was called the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, that the Mellon Hitchcocks had started, who were extremely wealthy, as I said, being part of Gulf Oil, Mellon Bank, and had U.S. intelligence operatives in their family. But Peggy and William Mellon Hitchcock just put tons of money into different headquarters for the Brotherhood of Eternal Love all over the country, and including Mexico. Timothy Leary was part of the group. A guy named Owsley, if you ever heard of him, Augustus Stanley Owsley III, was part of that group. And some of the clients that I've counseled said, they when they were dealing acid, they got it from the Brotherhood of Eternal Love up into the 80s and 90s. So it kept running, at least till the 90s, if not till today.
Well, and there's a lot, and the CIA's involvement in running drugs is not something new. I mean, this has been talked about for a long time. There's documents out there that support this. There's, of course, all that's come out. I mean, endless TV shows these days have been pushing information on that, showing the government's involvement, whether it be Narcos talking about the drug movements through Colombia into the United States, or even the show, I'm not even sure if it's on it anymore, but FX Snow, where they were showing how they were bringing crack and cocaine into certain neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So this is nothing new, and they were using it a lot
about that, and talking about saying that the head of the DEA said they caught the CIA trafficking cocaine in 1993, a ton of pure cocaine into the United States.
Yeah, through California, I believe it was, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, them moving all these drugs and also dealing with a lot of money for these secret wars that they were working on, being like a government inside the government, correct?
Yes. And, and some of these wars were for the sources of the drugs, because the longest wars in U.S. history were in Vietnam and Afghanistan, where there's the Golden Triangle and the Golden Crescent for poppy fields that produce opium and heroin. And so I just show that it's no coincidence that those were the longest wars in U.S. history, because the wars are for resources, and whether it's oil or drugs, those are the most profitable resources. And that's what we coveted, and that's what we covet now in Afghanistan, I show. I mean, there's other things that are there, too, lithium and other resources, but drugs is a big one.
John, you've done a tremendous amount of work in preparing your book and now the documentary film. Has anybody else brought any of these assertions to the public? Have there ever been any official court cases filed or anything along those lines?
Yeah, well, of course, Gary Webb was a big one to bring all this to light, and he had one of the first viral articles with his front page articles for the San Jose Mercury News for a week, and he had won a Pulitzer Prize on another project he had worked on before that. And sadly, he died young, and 2 shots to the head, and they said it was a suicide. But people like Robert Perry, a Newsweek writer who also wrote for the Associated Press, actually came out with this information even before Gary Webb, but Gary Webb made it the most popular.
Let's bring it back there for one second. You said 2 shots to the head, and it was listed as a suicide. I mean, I can understand somebody shooting themselves in the head once, but pulling that off twice.
Yeah, how you pull that trigger a second time is pretty amazing. I mean, I guess it could have been a double fire. Has that ever happened? I don't know. I mean,
I've never heard of that, but
I don't know.
Look, I'm not an
trying to give
expert,
somebody
but it sounds suspicious to me.
Yeah. We have to take a break here, but when we come back, we're going to continue the conversation because it's very interesting. We're going to open up the phone lines right now as well in case you want to chime in on the discussion or ask a question of our guest.
Yes, we're talking with John Potash, author and documentarian. You're listening to Jason and JV, Beyond Reality Radio. The phone number is 844-687-7669. We're going to take a quick break. A lot more to come.
Please support the program. Go to patreon.com/Johaw. That's JOHAW. I want to quickly take a listener phone call here. This is Philip in North Carolina. Hey, Philip, welcome to the program. You're on with John Potash.
All right. Thanks again, John, and thank you guys for having me on. I just saw a news story that seemed pertinent to this conversation, it was, I think it was conservativetree.com. And it said that Mitch McConnell had delivered a message to Donald Trump that if he goes through with pulling out of Afghanistan and Syria, that they'll go ahead and impeach him. And there's a list of Congress people, a bunch of Republicans, including senators, and then there was a list of the lobbyists who are backing this. And it's like a who's who of, the military-industrial complex. You got Dow Chemicals, then there was Boeing. I don't remember the whole list, but I haven't had an opportunity to see if this is a valid story. I suspect it is, but it just plays into the same thing. It's like, why are we in Afghanistan?
Right.
If you Google U.S. soldiers guarding poppy fields and look at the images go on and on and on and on. It's crazy.
It's incredible.
I'm sorry, I didn't really have a question.
No, that's okay. That's
okay. It's a real good point. It's not only the military-industrial complex, but Big Pharma, who I just heard Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talk about as being even twice as big as the military-industrial lobbyists. They have like twice as many lobbyists in Congress as military-industrial complex, because Big Pharma wants the cheaper opium for painkillers, but then they also understand that if they develop addictions to the painkillers, they'll make more money too, sadly enough. So, a lot of people want those poppy fields and want the opium, and for, all kinds of reasons, but a lot of them are, the biggest money, of course, is the heroin sales. And, it's a real shame. And so I document in the book, I got John Stockwell talking again about how his fellow agents told him that by the late 80s, and, they were already trafficking the opium out and heroin out of Afghanistan, that region, because that's the Golden Crescent for poppy fields, as I said earlier. Yeah. And so I showed the evidence that they then psychologically profiled the musicians that could popularize heroin for them, because when you got all that supply, you need to match it with demand. And so I showed the evidence that Kurt Cobain, because of a massive stomach problem he had dabbled and tried heroin just a few times in his life, according to his diaries from 1987 to 1991. And then into his life comes this bizarre woman, Courtney Love, who I showed the evidence was a prostitute as early in her own letter. She said she had prostituted as a teenager, and she was stripping for the Japanese mafia at one point. Then she's stripping for the Taiwanese mafia, going to those countries and stripping and being involved in live sex acts and all kinds of other stuff. And her father said that his daughter had he lost custody of his daughter when she was 5 or 6, because her biological mother's parents were super wealthy and bought off his lawyer. And then when she was 13 years old, she wrote him a letter from a juvenile delinquent facility and begging him to get her out of there. And he got her out of there and found that she was already drug addicted. And in her letter, she said that her counselors were having sex with her since she was an infant, 4 years old or so, and that they were giving her psychohypnotic drugs, the same kind of drugs actually that are used by MK Ultra. But either way, she was prostituting in her early teens, he found, and leaving heroin needles all over his home, and he had to kick her out. But then he was over in Ireland doing research for a book, and she visited him when she was 16, just turning 17. She brought over 1,000 hits of acid, and he inadvertently introduced her to a new friend of his, who later on, this guy named Stephen O'Leary, and Stephen O'Leary said on his deathbed that he was actually working for the CIA for all those years. And so Stephen O'Leary proceeds to take her under his wing for the next 6 weeks, and takes her over to London, where she passed. John,
we're going to have to, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off because we've got to take a hard break here.
All right, you listen to Jason JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll be back after this.
Please support the program. Go to patreon.com/Johhaw. That's JOHAW. It's great to be here. I love doing the show when we're both here because we get to chat about things that we don't get to normally talk about.
I love doing the show when I'm here.
It's the best way.
Yeah.
So I know there's not a lot we can talk about, but you're going to be going on the road soon.
Yeah.
Did I just say something I shouldn't have?
No. Yeah. I'm going to go on the road, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And you're going to be doing the show when you can from the road, various locations. This show, the radio show, yeah, from the road.
Trying to keep things in the bag. Go ahead.
Yeah, And but you're going to be able to do that from all these really cool locations. So that's going to be kind of neat.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I mean, drinking rum runners at bars and stuff, trying to do the show.
That's the kind of show I want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, JV and Jay and rum runner bars. Yeah, that'd be great.
That's actually
we'd have to work on the name. I think that name kind of sucks.
I don't think at that point we wouldn't even be able to say it.
No, I think that's actually how we'd be saying JV and J and bars rum runner.
So anyway, welcome back to the program, everybody. It's Jason and JV Beyond Reality Radio. Tomorrow night, actually later in tonight's program, we've got Rhonda and Dwight Hull joining us to talk about their new book called Conversations with Spirits of the Southwest. Tomorrow night, Charles Reichblum, who's also known as Dr. Knowledge, will be with us to talk about his book, the all-time book of fascinating facts, and they are fascinating.
They really are. I got to give them that. And then Thursday, we've got our good friend, we got readings with Rebecca. So make sure you call in. Rebecca gives great readings, and it's always a wonderful night.
Yeah, and the phone lines just go crazy. So if you are hoping to get through, you're going to have to get your dialing fingers ready and dial and dial and dial, and hopefully you'll get through. Tonight we're talking with John Potash about his new documentary, Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA War on Musicians and Activists. And John, I just want to take a step back to Philip's phone call before the break. He was talking about seeing a news report that Mitch McConnell and many senior Republicans had signed some type of letter to President Trump saying that if he pulled out of Afghanistan, that they would move or side with the Democrats to impeach him. Have you seen anything that might substantiate that report?
I haven't, I'm sorry to say, but I can totally believe it because it's sadly enough, both the Democrats and the Republicans both are constantly pro-war, especially pro-war in places like Afghanistan where the poppy fields are.
It's if anybody has an opportunity to verify that, Slick, if you could take a look at that too, that'd be worth checking out. I appreciate Philip bringing that to our attention because that is quite an important piece of information, particularly as this conversation continues. And I will say too that we do, if you do want to make a comment and ask a question, 844-687-7669 is the telephone number. Now, does this program, I know that you said that it had been killed and then it has been hidden under different names. As we fast forward to 2019, is this stuff still continuing?
I argue it is because, I mean, I focus the most on these four musicians, Jimi Hendrix, John Lennon, Kurt Cobain, and Tupac Shakur. And with Cobain, for example, after Love got him using heroin daily, he then sobered up and months before he died and showed the evidence of that. And then I have the head of the Academy of Forensic Science saying that he believes Cobain's death was a murder made to look like a suicide. And so he's in the film saying that. But so this is the way it all works. But I show how there's evidence of other people in the grunge scene who have died in the past 5 to 10 years. They had gotten into activism and they had sobered up, and their fates were similar to Cobain's. And then, of course, in the rap scene, I focus on Tupac and show how he was actually getting these gang peace truces across the country and stopping the drug dealing all across the country. Thousands of drug dealers and gangs were stopping drug dealing because of his movement with his Black Panther extended family, and that took huge amounts of profit away from the drug traffickers, the CIA, but also the money launderers of the banks. And so, but that continued, there was activism in the rap community continued in different ways, and I show that there's evidence that the targeting continued with people like Jam Master Jay of Run DMC when he became an activist. More and more, according to Baltimore Sun, he was done away with, and the videotape of the people that came into his studio and murdered him was never released, just like the videotape of the people that first shot Tupac in New York was never done any, no one did anything with that video. So this is the way police seem to, hide evidence in these situations. And so there's evidence, sure, that it's continued to today, but my research just had to stop at a certain point and, put it into package form in the book and then the film.
I know you don't have a lot of time left for us. In fact, I think we've kept you over time a little bit. I want to take one more listener phone call, and then I have one more question for you before we let you go. Okay, this is Vince in Missouri. Hey, Vince, you have a question for John?
Yes, I do, actually. We can't go with mob rules as far as we was talking about Tupac and all that goes, but Afghanistan, we were over there for a reason. And, as far as the drug trade goes, look, the demand is here. That's why the drugs come here. And you can take the troops from where, here, there, put them wherever you want. As long as you have demand, there's going to be a supply. And you can rotate it around the world, clockwise, counterclockwise. If we don't get people's minds thinking right, and that they're clouding us and dumbing us down and making us stupid, legalizing all these drugs, then
we're kind of hopeless. I think that's a great point, Vince. And I think what John has been saying all along, the CIA's effort is to get the drugs into the hands of influencers like these musicians to create the demand. I'm assuming that's what the whole point is, right, John?
Supply and demand.
Yes, to increase the demand. And, I've been working 30 years to decrease the demand amongst, and trying to get addicts into recovery and sobriety. So I hope to keep doing that, but it's sad that I'm fighting a tough battle when the CI's Project MK Ultra is doing the opposite and trying to promote it more and more, and including with ecstasy amongst rappers and like Eminem and others who has sobered up since he first started promoting ecstasy, but also other musicians have been promoting ecstasy. They call it Molly now, but I show the origins of that and related to chemical warfare and all.
So one more quick question here. The many of the musicians that we've talked about tonight and we've talked about in other cases are members of the 27 Club. They died at the age of 27. I know that number isn't necessarily specific to what we're talking about, but are those deaths all in question as it relates to the conversation we've had tonight?
Well, I didn't get into it in my book, but I do show how the CIA has used anniversary timing tactics with other situations, such as the year anniversary of Martin Luther King saying he was against the Vietnam War, and he was assassinated, and other situations like that. So I think it's not beyond the possibility that 27 was used in that way to give some kind of subconscious warning to people, because Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin, I cover in the book, Jimi Hendrix were all 27, and there's more than that. Of course, there's many of them, and sadly enough, a lot of them did have drug problems. But I show that Janis was getting more into activism, was sobering up. Kurt Cobain was sober according to blood tests, and Jimi Hendrix was sobering up according to his fiancée in her memoir before she died. This is, the way it seems to be.
Okay, so where can people see the documentary Drugs as Weapons Against Us?
So it's available video on demand on iTunes, Vudu, Vimeo, Microsoft Xbox, Google Play, YouTube Rent. You can also buy it from Barnes & Noble, Best Buy, Walmart, Target, Amazon, of course, places like that. And if you want to find out more about it, go to www.drugsasweapons.com. And if you want to find out more about the movie, within that link, you can also go to drugsasweaponsmovie.com. But drugsasweapons.com is easiest to remember, so I hope you find out more about it all there and see the trailer.
Well, John, thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us again. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and we look forward to talking to you again. All right, you have a great night now.
You have to hope something like that's not true, but the more we hear stories about what the government is capable of, the more we have to take stories like that and say, we really need to take this seriously and give it a lot of consideration.
Well, and it's scarier because very few people are paying attention, and even when they do, very few people are holding their feet to the fire for the things that they do, and they get away with.
That's an absolutely excellent point. We reelect the same people over and over again, and they just get away with murder, and I mean that literally in many cases.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But we're going to change the topic of conversation. Our next guests for this evening are Rhonda and Dwight Hull, paranormal researchers, psychic mediums. We've had them on the program before. They have a new book. It's called Conversations with Spirits of the Southwest, a continued journey into the paranormal. So we're excited to have both Rhonda and Dwight with us. Welcome back to the program, guys.
I'm great to be back.
No, happy to have you back.
So, Dwight, what have the two of you been up to since you were on the program?
Oh, just trying to get this second book all buttoned up and out there, and from there we're still out there doing our thing and investigating and going out to some of these ghost towns and revisiting some of these ghost towns, and we got basically a playground of the Old West out here, so we try to get out into it as often as we can.
Well, and it's got such incredible places out that way. But what's interesting about this book is it's following the continuing paranormal adventures of you all as you explore the history of Old West by speaking with the best of all possible sources, the spirits of men and women who lived it. Yeah.
What we do is, we go out and, Rhonda's a psychic. We also had Dan Baldwin with us, who is a pendulum dowser, kind of added a new flavor to the mix, so to speak. And, I've been investigating for many, many years and also a psychic medium. So, we go out and we try to make contact with whatever spirits are, in the area or in that location. And we try to get some answers, try to ask them some questions. And, basically what we try to do is learn history through the people who live that history, and we've gotten some pretty interesting stuff.
Well, I think that's amazing to hear, because I find it hard enough to go to a case and actually catch EVPs, but you guys are catching enough information to actually write entire stories about that.
Yeah. Between the pendulum and a psychic medium, and they kind of lack of a better term, fact check each other. They don't look at each other when, we're in a location, so one's not feeding off the other. So, we kind of corroborate, information right there on the spot. We do get EVPs on occasion, but what's nice about this that we're doing is we're kind of getting answers, lack of a better word, real time. So we're able to direct the questions and the conversation in a better way instead of, recording for, X number of minutes or hours, going home, listening to it and say, oh, hey, we got an EVP here, we got to go back, that kind of a thing. And, it works out pretty well, and we're able to, get some answers anyway.
Well, and you guys also open it up for readers to be able to go over to your website and hear the actual voices of the spirits that are contacted by you all?
Yeah, we do. We put all the EVPs up on our website. They're all in the book. And then you can just go right to the website and log on and go in there and listen to all of them. And, we try to share as much as we can with people.
As you were investigating and researching and visiting the places, the Southwest is a vast area with a lot of desert and a lot of unpopulated areas. So what did you use as your criteria to decide where to go?
In the first book, we kind of tried to go to places that people would know, Tombstone and those kind of places. In the second book, we did that as well, but we kind of branched out and, we did a little bit of research on ghost towns or, forgotten ghost towns. A lot of these places were on private land now. They're not even on government land. They're on private land. So we'd contact the owners and see if we can come on and that kind of a thing. And, the only real criteria to investigating it is, that there was at least people there. A good example of that is the Presidio that we went to. It's an old Spanish fort out here, built in 1776. And, we went out there just absolutely wanting to talk to, the Spanish soldiers or the Apaches who fought the Spanish soldiers. And we got out there and we, just kind of came up with a goose egg on that. We didn't, contact the Spanish soldiers. We weren't able to contact the Apaches. However, we did unexpectedly contact, I guess you'd call them Paleo Indians. They were the Clovis people, way before. We're talking thousands of years before. That was an interesting conversation because although they seemed, I guess, to understand our language, and we say that because they did, kind of converse with us, so to speak, and we did get some EVPs in English, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Rhonda, I've got to ask you, we've talked about this before, but as a psychic medium, how do you apply those sensitivities on these investigations that you do?
Well, anytime we're out, really anywhere, but going on an investigation, typically the people that are there will make contact before we ever get there. I'll pick up a feeling on, if it's a female or male, and then as we get closer, names, visions. So by the time we get there, I have a pretty good idea of who's there. I don't typically say anything until we begin what we're going to do.
When you say you don't say anything until you begin what you're going to do, do you mean you don't communicate with the spirit? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't communicate with Dwight and Dan.
Oh, I see.
I don't give away anything before we start what we're doing, so that we can corroborate each other.
I see. Okay, so you're getting this information, you're getting this communication, this contact well in advance of the investigation, but you don't relay any of that information.
That is correct.
Yeah. Do you find that you have more success than not in corroborating the information that the guys find in the more scientific approach to the investigation?
Well, I think that we kind of, for the most part, what we've done, we can scientifically back up what we are all getting. I know there's been a few occasions when we've gone to a location to hopefully speak to a group of people that we know were there, and then we get sidetracked by somebody else who's there. That happened in the Superstition Mountains with Alicia Rivas, who was a gold miner, I guess you would say, and a recluse. We went up there to talk to a group of people who fought in a massacre, and as we were leading down this trail, this man kind of jogged us a different direction, and Dan was like 20 yards in front, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, we need to go over this way. And so we all went over and dropped down into a wash and had a conversation with this man. At the time, Dan was getting that there was a different individual there. Dwight and I both were seeing and feeling this other man. So we may have talked to two individuals, but Alicia Rivas gave us the most information. And we got backed up with electronics, with EVP.
Dwight, from the other side of this discussion, as Rhonda is doing her work as a psychic medium, how are you operating simultaneous to that?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm running recorders. We don't take a lot of equipment out with us, especially when we're out in the middle of nowhere. My main function when we go out and do something like that is I'm the guy who asks the questions, kind of leads the interview, so to speak. I'm a former police officer, so that kind of comes natural to me. So I just kind of took over the role, so to speak. So I'll ask the questions. Rhonda will either audibly give me the answers, or Dan will say, well, that's a yes, on the pendulum, or no, that's a no. And, we kind of, lead the questions that way. So Dan's working with one piece of equipment, which is, the pendulum. Rhonda's doing, her psychic work, and I'm, basically leading the questions and trying to do the interview.
You're interrogating.
Basically, yeah.
I'm just trying to play. You're an ex-officer. Let's just call it what it is, right?
I'm always the good cop. Yeah, I can't play bad cop. I tried. I can't come off with it.
So let's talk about some of the accounts and the stories that you included in the book. What impressed you the most?
I think what impressed me the most, and what impressed all of us the most, is for the most part the willingness for a lot of these spirits that are hanging around these towns to talk to us. Doing what we do, we're able to kind of get more of an extended conversation, not just go in there and run recorders, ask your questions, and then try to get an EVP. By using a psychic medium and a pendulum dowser, we're actually, like I said before, able to get, answers kind of real time. So I think we were all kind of surprised at the willingness that a lot of these spirits had to, contact us and talk to us and tell us their story. Some were more willing than others, of course, and, Jason, of course, that for sure. But it was a comfort really to know that, there's, good folks out there that, just want to talk or, in some cases just want to be left alone. But, we did that too, if they wanted us to.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dwight. Let me ask this. Before we went to break a little while ago, you were talking about when you went out and trying to contact some Native Americans, but actually ones from long prior made contact with you and they were speaking English. Now, why do you think that was? How do you think that they had the ability to communicate with you speaking English, especially when it really wasn't even in the country at that time?
Right. My theory on that, and it goes with just about any place you go that has, tourism or people coming out, because this place, it's not a really well-known place, but they do take, on occasion tours out, and a lot of people around the area go out there. So my thought is, they just pick it up over time. I mean, if you spend 20 years in France, you're going to pick up the language. These folks who we think, we hope we were talking to that were, paleo 10,000 years ago, they were listening to, the Spanish and the cowboys and the Indians and everything else. And, nowadays they're listening to the English come up there and speak their language. So I'm thinking it's just, saturation. They just pick it up from the people who are out there.
Well, I like that. I like how you answered that because every so often you see these silly memes going around online and stuff, and there's always these ones about the ghost hunters asking a question in a 500-year-old castle and German castle, and something responds in English. And the fact of the matter is,
right.
They always have my image on it, even though I've never been in a 500-year-old castle in Germany investigating, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, over time, I mean, just because they're in their realm doesn't mean that they can't learn things. And if English is a language that's being spoken all the time around these locations, of course, over time, these things will learn and they'll be able to speak multiple languages.
Right, exactly. And, the only problem we ran into with that particular case was we were using terms that they just didn't know. We were saying bow and arrow. Well, they didn't have a bow and arrow. They had spears. So they didn't even know what we were talking about. So, the pendulum would go flat, and Rhonda's like, I don't think they know what you're talking about. So I had to kind of rephrase it and, talk about, another kind of a weapon. And that's how we were able to kind of stumble our way through. But even though they understand our language, they may not understand our terms. So it's kind of important, for us to know that and kind of try to regroup on a fly and, re-ask a question or try to redirect it.
Well, and we've had that as well in certain locations when you're asking, are you from OK? And okay, but way back then they weren't referring to Oklahoma as OK thing. So yeah, there's a lot of different confusions, especially when you're trying to talk to something that may be from 100, 200 years ago, where words we use now weren't prevalent back then.
Right, and we do run into that a lot.
We've actually been taught a language or a word that we didn't know that was an 1800s term, Dwight.
Really? What was that?
Right. Yeah, we went out to the Clanton Ranch, the old Clanton Ranch, Clantons and McLaury's.
Yeah.
we went out there, and on our way out, we got all cut up by the mesquite bushes and such like that. So we were kind of bleeding, and we got an EVP, just an amazing EVP from an older Southern guy who we think was Mr. Clanton. And he said, over here, long way, really bad brush sting. And that was the whole EVP, and it was super clear. It was a Class A. And I heard that, and I was like, what the heck is brush sting? We had to Google it because they used a term that I didn't know. And, of course, brush sting is when you get cut up by the brush when you're going through, and usually talk about horses, but, he said brush sting. So that was kind of a reverse. They used a term that we didn't know, so luckily we have Google. They didn't, so it was easier for us to check it out. But it was kind of an interesting time.
Yeah, I understand that. So, have you ever had an experience? Either of you ever had an experience with pretty much a not nice spirit?
Yeah, I'll let Rhonda take that one. She tells that one.
Only really, I think, ever once. With a really not nice spirit, we were investigating a field out in not too far from here, where it was what's the word I'm looking for? The law enforcement of the 80s went to go serve a warrant on a cult faction that was living there, and there was it was the killing field. But Dwight, I've lost my train of thought here.
Okay, well, I'll take over then. And the cult, the religious cult, kind of got into it with the police officers. So there was a shootout, and people got killed and injured. So we went there, and it was just full of just really. I mean, you could feel it when you get into the field, and I'm sure, Jason, you felt it at times too. I mean, you walk into a place and you can just feel it. It's like a wet blanket covering you. Yeah. So we knew we were kind of in a bad area. In a bad situation, but we did our investigation, and we came up with some EVPs. But when we got home, we walked into our house, and the house just stunk. I mean, best I can describe it is like rotten fish. And we went outside. We took a step outside. There's no smell. We went inside the house, and there was a smell. And it just kind of dawned on us that, hey, we brought something home, and it's not good from that field. And, I got to tell you, we tried to get rid of it and, started talking to it, telling them it had to leave. And, that's, when I saw my wife turn into the exorcist, and she just started spouting words that, she made a trucker proud. And she got rid of it. I mean, literally within maybe a minute and a half, the smell was gone. And, it was... Yeah, so that's probably about the only nasty one that we ran into during the making of this book, both books actually. But you just have to be careful out there because sometimes they do follow you home, and sometimes they're not. Casper the Friendly Ghost.
We've got just a couple minutes here left to chat about the books, and tell people where they can get a hold of them. I know your website is Believe Paranormal, and that's B as in Bumblebee, BEE, BelieveParanormal.com. There's information about the books there, but where can people get a hold of them?
Any place where you buy your books. Amazon, I don't know if Walmart's got it yet, but Amazon and all the online book places, Barnes & Noble. So any place you buy your books, you should be able to find it there.
All right. Well, let me ask. Go ahead, JV.
No, if you have another question.
I just want to. So if you could investigate any place out there right now, where would it be?
Out here?
Well, yeah, just any place in the world. How about that?
Oh, any place in the world. Right now, my big place to investigate would be Meriwether Lewis's cabin where he died.
Okay. Absolutely.
That's just a huge mystery to me, and I really would like to go there and try to investigate that and try to get some answers because I don't believe he killed himself. So, it's the whole conspiracy theory thing, and I would love to talk to him and find out what happened there.
Do people have to read the first book to appreciate the second book, or are they both standalone?
They're both standalone. We did the second book kind of as a companion to the first, and it's just bringing in some different locations, but you don't have to read one to read the other.
All right. Terrific.
Well, thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us, and we look forward to having you all on again, talking again at some point.
Cool. Thank you so much for having us on. We had a great time.
Thanks for having us.
You have a great night.
Tomorrow night, we've got Charles Reichblum, Dr. Knowledge, on the program, talking about his book, The All-Time Book of Fascinating Facts. And we've had him on the program a couple of times, and it is always fascinating. A little humorous, intriguing, all that.
Traumatizing.
Sometimes, yeah.
It's everything.
Sometimes it is.
So, and then Thursday, we've got our friend Rebecca on. So we'll have readings with Rebecca Foster, which is always a very interesting and busy show. So make sure you call in. Rebecca gives you a great reading or not so great reading. Usually they're all positive. And go from there. If you haven't yet, make sure you head over to facebook.com/Beyond Reality Radio. Like that Facebook page for us. Then head to beyondrealityradio.com. You're able to find all the stations we are on across the country, and that list is constantly being updated with new stations being added all the time. We're actually getting ready to add a few more over the next week. You can also download the smartphone apps for Android and iPhone, which allow you to listen live, catch past shows, join the online chat, and more. Or any night we're live, just feel free to click the Listen Live button or the Listen Live and Chat button, and you can listen right there from the website while hanging out with a great community of people or just browsing the rest of the web. If you download the show from iTunes or anywhere else, just do us a favor and take 2 seconds of your time and rate it for us. Helps push it forward and makes it easier to find, and that's what it's all about, just getting the word out. That's pretty much going to do it for us tonight. So again, make sure you tune in tomorrow. We got Charles Reichblum on, Dr. Knowledge. We're going to be talking about fascinating facts from the all-time book of fascinating facts. You listen to Jason JV, Beyond Reality Radio. We'll catch you all tomorrow.
Beyond Reality Paranormal is hosted by J.V. Johnson and produced by Orion Palmer and Slick Eddie Edwards. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please consider supporting the program either through your podcast platform, click on the link in the description, or on Patreon at Joha Productions. If you'd like to be a guest on Beyond Reality Paranormal or you have a recommendation for a guest, contact our producer, Slick Eddie Edwards. Eddie is spelled with a Y at slickeddieedwards@gmail.com.